As some of you may know, speedrunning is a pastime of mine that I quite enjoy. It's a hobby that I picked up a few years ago and have since become enamored with. I never really got too competitive with any of the games that I ran, just trying them out to see if they were fun to me. That is, except for one game. It's called Crush and it's on Sony's PlayStation Portable. Only me and like 2 other people run the game, but I've dedicated a lot of my time to it. I've made it a goal of mine to optimize the route of every single level in both any percent and 100%, and I'm pretty close to doing that first one. Over the 3 years I've been routing and learning things about Crush, I've discovered one big thing. Crush is an undeniably jank game. It's surprising too. I initially thought that maybe they had a pretty small team or only just one programmer, but no, they had at least 5 people working on the code. So to be honest, I don't know what's up. And I just sort of figured, hey, maybe I could talk about this game that I like and all the weird stuff that's going on in it, I don't know. To be clear, we're talking about the PSP version, not the 3DS one. That one came out a few years later and has a worse art style, different movement, all that jazz. I don't want to talk about it, it's lame, dumb, I hate it. Not to mention, after that Mother video I did a few months ago, I really just don't want to compare versions again. It got so tiring and boring and I hated it. So, before we begin, I think explaining the basic mechanics of the game will help you to understand what makes these weird oddities and glitches tick. You play as Danny, a chronic insomniac whose life has gone down the gutter after he's gotten less and less sleep. He decides he's had enough of that and sees a doctor named Dr. Rubens about his ailment. Rubens decides to treat Danny with this new machine he's invented, Crush, and you play the entire game inside Danny's mind, visiting different areas of his past. The game's main gimmick is the Crush, where upon pressing the L button, you'll flatten the playfield around you depending on which way the camera is facing. Imagine Super Paper Mario, but way more complicated. You can also uncrush by pressing the L button again, but if you'd appear over a pit when you get back into 3D, it won't let you uncrush, and you have to find a safer spot to do so. In each level, there are important collectibles called marbles. In any given level, you have to collect half of the marbles to unlock the exit. Then you can go to the exit and finish the stage. Upon finishing a level, you're graded on time, amount of crushes used, times died, and collectibles gotten, to get a rank A through F. Those are the basics, but there are other obstacles in your way, such as thoughts, which are these neon signs that will appear on walls and floors of the levels. If you crush in an area where the 2D plane has a thought fully visible, that thought will activate and will only deactivate once off screen. Thoughts can have all sorts of effects, from locking your crush ability, to doubling your jump height, to making certain collectibles appear. Gears also work in a similar way, only activating once you crush them into 2D, although these will work off screen and will move platforms instead of the various effects thoughts can have. Yet another thing that only works in 2D, paintings can make objects appear, like rollers and block walkers. Finally, the last hazard that will be relevant to this video is the alarm clock. When crushed into 2D, alarm clocks will begin ticking down a timer, and the only way to get rid of them is to step on the big red button on top of it. If you run out of time, you die and have to restart the level. Danny is asleep, so I suppose an alarm clock killing him makes sense. Those are just a few of the many different types of hazards in Crush. Do you get now why this game is so complicated? Each mechanic has its own interesting interactions with the Crush ability, and leads to some very complex puzzle platforming stages in the later worlds. Speaking of which, let's say you were to go play this game right now for the first time. The first thing you notice is that the controls are, clunky. Danny's movement is a little bit delayed, he jumps about as high as a sloth, jumping from a standstill will give you no horizontal movement, you take fall damage, you can't jump for a solid second after basically any cutscene, including dialogue. This actually leads to some pretty interesting routing in the speedrun, but I digress. Yeah, it's definitely built like a puzzle game. Danny is more of a vessel for you to solve puzzles rather than a platforming hero. In-universe, he is a sleepy boy, so I guess it has lore relevance. So, why is it like this? Well, as I said earlier, Danny feels like a vessel for solving puzzles. If he controlled like every other 3D platformer, he could just skip huge parts of levels. Hey, see, what did I tell you? So what can you do with the sleepy boy in his dream world? Well, to begin, you can skip basically any cutscene that doesn't have dialogue by jumping. Yeah, cutscenes simply will just not play if you're in the air. Crushing can also be used to skip the little animation where Danny falls onto the ground at the beginning of a level, but I'm pretty sure that's frame perfect and it's really hard to get consistently, since you have to press L and X on the exact same frame as the loading screen goes away. Loading screens are inconsistent, so this is inconsistent. This also applies to falling from a high enough place to have the collapse animation play, but not enough to die. I actually discovered this after writing this script, so I'm putting it here. It can be used to make certain cycles in the speedrun, and the reason for that is... When Danny falls far enough to have the collapse animation play but not enough to die, there is exactly one frame when you hit the ground where you can input a jump, a crouch, or a crush. In Sinking Feeling, there's an elevator at the end of the level that takes you up to the exit, and this runs on what's known as a cycle. Cycles are like buses. They come at certain times whenever you restart the level and are always consistent. There's an explanation of this done by Darvian and popularized by Summoning Salt, more commonly known as the frame rule. If you've ever heard of that, imagine this elevator as the level ending in Mario 1, but instead of coming just once every so often, it goes both down and up. The original route for this level was just to get all the marbles you could at the beginning, ride the elevator up, be off by just one marble, go all the way back down to get an extra, and then go all the way back up again. This, as I'm sure you can imagine, was extremely slow. One of my early theories to make this level faster was to grab this red marble right here, but it was too slow and you ended up making the same cycle you'd make otherwise. And so, with this glitch, which I've opted to call a frame-perfect collapse recovery buffer, you can perform the glitch right here to freeze the elevator in place, since doing a failed crush will freeze moving objects, but still have your collapse animation be playing so that by the time the failed crush animation finishes, you'll be able to move again and make the cycle while still getting the red marble, saving just under 10 seconds and putting the level's final time under 40 seconds. So yeah, it's a pretty simple glitch. Crushing can actually be used in a few places to get weird stuff to happen, like this part in the basics where you can uncrush as a cutscene is happening. Also, this can happen in Snookered. I don't even know what's going on here. If you uncrush as soon as a thought comes on screen, you can keep the effect of that thought even in 3D, which is normally impossible. I've only ever gotten this to work on exactly one level, a Sinking Feeling, but I'd imagine it works in other places too. You can also step on buttons through walls, like in Out of the Frying Pan, where you can deactivate an alarm clock all the way over there on this side of the wall. Speaking of alarm clocks, you can beat Dive In, Avalanche, and Faulty Tower without ever disabling them. Dive In is a weird case because you have to deliberately try to not press the button, but it is possible to do it in the allotted time. Hey, remember when I said that Danny's controls are smartly designed to make sure the player can't get up to any funny business and just skip huge chunks of levels? Yeah, I actually lied about that. There's 3 levels where this applies, and strangely enough they're all in the final world of the game. Gobbledygook, Merry-Go-Round, and Lock, Block, and Barrel all have some form of skip you can do by doing a trick called a corner jump, where you jump around a corner without touching a wall, preserving your speed but still sending you in the direction you want to go. As previously said, Danny is a very clunky character to control, so if you hit a wall in the air, you'll just lose all your speed and plummet all the way down. Using this in Gobbledygook just saves a few seconds towards the end, but in the other two it skips huge chunks of puzzles. And hey, while we're on the topic of Merry-Go-Round, can I just flex my speedrunner muscle for a sec? Merry-Go-Round is a contender for one of the hardest cycles to make in the any % speedrun of Crush. The precipice of this level is that there are 3 sets of platforms moving around the level at all times. You have to ride these platforms to get to specific areas, waiting around for the platforms once you get off, all things like that. Or you could just do it all in one cycle. You have to get off at very specific locations to collect marbles, then immediately get back on platforms, else you'll miss your chance. And to top it all off, at the very end you have to do a very precise corner jump to the exit. If you miss, you have to restart all the way from the beginning, since the checkpoint respawns you in a way where you'll miss your cycle due to this little animation that plays upon restarting. The individual level version of this also has its own little quirk, where because ILs are timed off of in-game time, and in-game time only starts once you gain control, you can wait on this little intro screen for the platforms to arrive at Danny's stop and then begin the level. Actually, for most if not all ILs, waiting on this intro screen for Danny to get up can save a bit of time. Just one of those weird little quirks of Crush. But didn't I say Merry-Go-Round was a contender for the hardest cycle in any %? Yeah, there's something even harder than that. Let me introduce you to On the Rocks, one of the most intense levels not only in the speedrun, but just in casual play. This level is Danny climbing a lighthouse, which has this light going around it at all times. When in 2D, that light will temporarily erase any platform it touches, and Danny will fall straight through it. Only with proper marble routing, movement, crushes, and camera management can you just barely make the first cycle available. Like, I'm talking inches from death here. If you fall all the way down, you're going back to the beginning. Sure, the later levels in Nursery may be more confusing and require much more thought, but On the Rocks requires absolute perfect execution and game knowledge on the player to beat it optimally. I would say without a doubt that On the Rocks is the hardest level in any %. Sorry for the side tangent, had to get that out of my system. What was I talking about? Glitches and oddities? Right, yeah. Last thing I could think to talk about is the most egregious issue I've had with Crush. Okay, so I used to speedrun this game on emulator, right? I ran it on PPSSPP, which is widely regarded as the best PSP emulator out there. Crush used to run just fine on it, with the exception of a few graphical bugs that could be fixed by changing what 3D renderer PPSSPP was using. But then, in December of 2020, I suddenly started having this issue between levels where an error message would pop up that said, "The memory stick has changed. Would you like to continue using this memory stick?" And no matter what I chose, no matter what settings I changed, it would not stop giving me this error message. Even with optimal menuing, this adds an extra 6 seconds to the end of each level. That doesn't sound like much, but considering there are 34 levels in the current any% route, that's an extra 3.5 minutes added to every run done in an emulator. That's a lot for a speedrun that's only 40 minutes long. The game is perfectly playable otherwise, so this message only affects me as a speedrunner. I thought, oh, it just must be an issue with the new PPSSPP update. I'll go download an older version, that'll fix it. But no! Every version I've tried of PPSSPP has done this, even the exact version I used for my old world record, which is clearly shown in this video, does not give me the error message. I've tried other computers, like my laptop, and it still gives me the message. I've asked other people to try it on their computer and it gives me the message. So I don't know where this comes from. Hell, I even joined the PPSSPP Discord server to try and get some help from the devs themselves, and even they don't know what to do to fix it. It got so bad that I decided running the game on PS Vita would be my best option, since that's the only way I can play the game without it giving me this terrible error message and I have decent load times, and that has a balls frame rate! My only theory for what causes this is that either a certain update to Windows that came out sometime after November 2020, something to do with new hard drives, or that computers just hate me. If anyone can find a way to fix this and get it working on my computer, I will PayPal you $10. I am not kidding, I will put up a bounty for this. It's for the future of my favorite speed game. Okay, 2 side tangents in a row, my apologies. I've just had that in my brain for like 3 years now. Thank you so much for watching this video about one of my favorite games, it means so much to me. Shout out to Spinny for being the first Crush speedrunner. He did a run of all levels before I even picked up the game, and mad respect for that. If you like what you saw, I recommend going out and giving this game a try. It's by far one of the most creative and interesting puzzle platformers out there. It's got a banger soundtrack too. I want to see more people know about Crush more than anything, so tell a friend or something. I'll catch you later. See ya.